What do you say when the New Zealand police and Oranga Tamariki come to your house? You say nothing. You shut up. It's very important. You ask them, you got a warrant or am I under arrest? And if you're after neither, you say thank you, had a nice day, and you go on your way, but you shut up. 90% of people incriminate themselves when they talk to the New Zealand police and Oranga Tamariki, and when you're dealing with Oranga Tamariki, you're going to get a pack of lies anyway. I'm really humbled to be here today. I cannot believe that I'm standing and talking with the Black Panthers. And they were 16 years old. Racial injustice matters. All injustice matters. And that's very important because I think most of us would have liked to have believed we grow up in a fair and just society. But that's actually not true. The biggest abusers to justice in New Zealand is the state, by far. We formed Families for Justice with some voluntary people. None of us are, there's one down there. We were all just volunteers and we were victims. And we got together because we had a united vision that we had to change the New Zealand Family Court and their associates, DHBs, Oranga Tamariki and the New Zealand Police. Because they are destroying our families. 3% of parents actually abuse their children. It's actually very low. Yet 60% of children that go into state care are sexually or physically violated. Now, there's no argument on that anymore because we've got the Royal Commission on Sexual Abuse. We've got 250,000 people saying that they were abused in state care. And they say that's the tip of the iceberg. It's 460,000. So who is the biggest abuser? And we're only talking about kids at the moment. Look, I know from my own personal experience how corrupt the state is. You know, I've won 3 court cases against the New Zealand Police, and not one of them have been held to account yet. Not one. And to fight 3 court cases and win against the overriding power of the state, when they've got all our taxpayers' money and you're a self-litigant, is pretty hard. The police need us to do successful policing in the community. And so, you know, a couple of weekends ago we protested outside the New Zealand Police in Hamilton. I don't think that'll be the end of it. We originally started with Kapiti, and I think we did Tauranga some years ago. So Families for Justice is a group of parents that have been abused by the state through the abuse of Oranga Tamariki, the judiciary, the New Zealand Police, and so forth. And when you attack our families, you know, I can't imagine what it must be like to be Maori, because you people are the most targeted group in New Zealand society, right? And there's no way we can wash that. It's a fact, you know. And I grew up in a children's home, so I know why a lot of men, particularly, end up in the gangs. Some of my mates ended up in the gangs. I was uniquely surprised. I ended up going to Africa to play rugby, and I never came home for a long time. But I know what goes on in those children's homes. And if you've lived in a children's home and that bond is broken with your parent, you have nothing. You only have your mates. And sadly, the next institution is prison. And the state creates this. That's what makes me so angry the most, is that they cannot see that the abuse is going on in child, youth and family, in social welfare, in Oranga Tamariki, is because they're breaking the bond with the parent and they've got no choice. they're with their mates, and sadly, they head off to prison. I think that there's an incredible statistic, and I don't want to quote it today because I can't remember it, about the number of people in prison that have been in state care. It's huge. Is it what? 60 to 80% from my colleague down here. So, you know, I've just come back from doing a submission at the Justice Committee on the voice of the child. We had to do our submission 3 times to get it accepted because the secrecy of the lack of transparency and the ability to hide the corruption in the family court and abuse our children is of such epidemic proportion that we had to change our submission 3 times. And yes, we sat there with Simon Bridges and a few other MPs and whatever, and I noticed that not one of them asked a question of us. And we told them how angry we were. And in our submission, we've also got all the changes that need to be made. Yet I watched on television, on parliamentary TV, all the other groups that were speaking. Most of them were NGOs or lawyers groups or they were basically sucking money off the government. They got questions from the ministers. But we, the people, they didn't give us questions. They gave us silence. And we told them how angry we were. I just want to go on to, some things that I've discovered. Is we now know that Oranga Tamariki are a lawless, corrupt outfit, off the scale, that shouldn't actually exist in a lawful, free and decent society in New Zealand. And we know this because of a wonderful woman and her midwives that stood up to them, and the New Zealand Police, and the Department of, and the DHBs, Jen Tahuia. And I'm telling you, and I'm sure you guys know, that to stand up to all of those departments and all of those police officers is a heroic thing. And what was really sad was that one of the social workers was Maori, who was actually trying to take that child. And how they turned on their own people so dramatically and really believed what they were doing was right. Well, we know from the Ombudsman's report, who was an ex-family court judge, was that Oranga Tamariki breached their domestic and international laws in those uplifts. Now, what he said was that to take away someone's guardianship from their children is supposed to be a matter of last resort, and that Oranga Tamariki had been using those as a matter of course. I want to know why there is not a Royal Commission of Inquiry, or at least an investigation into all those Section 78s. And those kids returned. We haven't even talked about those kids being returned. And I know this because I'm a white Palangi, and they took my kids under a Section 78. And I got my kids back, but it took 4 bloody years and a hell of a lot of money. And I want to see that every person is held to account. The Nuremberg trials, they say that you cannot use, that was a law, I was under instruction that wasn't right to justify criminal behaviour and breaches of human rights. These people should be in jail, and that's including the Gestapo, the New Zealand police, that have been coming around and taking and bullying those parents to give up their children. It's unacceptable behaviour. We can't have that of the state. And what on earth is the judiciary doing? They're supposed to be the interloper of the power between the overwhelming strength of the state versus the fragile rights of a citizen. But what's the judiciary doing? They're supporting the state. The most criminal organisation in New Zealand that is destroying our families. And why are these judges not being investigated? I'll tell you why. Because in 2000, The United Nations repertoire came to New Zealand, and he laid a complaint to the New Zealand government. I could actually quote you the report number if you wish. But he said that he had grave concerns about the impartiality the judiciary was operating under and their immunity to prosecution. So we've been running a lawless judiciary. The judicial elite in this country are out of control. And in 2005, to get around it, what they did is they set out the Judicial Conduct Review Office. So that's where we were able to lay our complaints against the judiciary. In 2019, there were 3,056 complaints against judicial officers of the Crown. Please tell me, how many do you think were upheld? None. None! We have got groups of people around New Zealand now laying complaints to the United Nations that they were hoodwinked by our government in putting in this judicial complaints system. The judiciary is supposed to be independent of the state. And when we see it in the family court, it's supporting the criminal activities of Oranga Tamariki, their eugenics, their racial hygiene, their social engineering. And we need to be holding those people to account by the law. And they should be in prison. And those kids should be back home. So injustice in all its forms, including racial injustice, matters. And, you know, I'm actually proud to be here today when these people were 16 years old. I was 50 before I woke up. I've got the most respect for these people. I'm humbled that I'm up here on the stage with them. But, guys, there's only one way we're going to do this, and this is together. Right? United has to be the future. And we are working really hard to convince the public that, you know, we started only with Oranga Tamariki. We knew the family court was crazy. I mean, I was one of the guys and girls down there that we protested outside the judges' houses in Auckland. Brooker versus New Zealand Police Supreme Court of Appeal says we can. I have no criminal convictions, yet I've been looked at by the police on my national intelligence database 1,800 times since 2014. We've got to do this together, because this is just destroying our families and our society, and it's not good enough. But thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and